It's a pleasure to welcome you to the Symphony of Courage, a documentary on the evacuation of young musicians of the Afghanistan National Institute of Music in 2021. My name is Beth. I'm the director of the Cambridge Center for Study of Global Human Movement and the convener of the Cambridge Refugee Hub. February 29, 2020, the US and the Taliban signed the Doha Agreement. This agreement provided for the withdrawal of all NATO forces from Afghanistan, including all military forces of the United States, its allies, its coalition partners, all non-diplomatic civilian personnel, private security contractors, trainers, advisors, and supporting services personnel within only 14 months. 4 months before the deadline expired, on May 1st, 2021, the Taliban and allied militants started an offensive, making quickly significant territorial gains over the summer, eventually capturing Kabul, as you will remember, on the 15th of August 2021. The Islamic Republic of Afghanistan under President Ashraf Ghani was overthrown, and the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, under the control of the Taliban, reinstated. Over 100,000 people were evacuated within 2 weeks before the last US soldier departed on the 30th of August 2021. Many had to remain and submit to harsh Taliban rules. You will remember those days as you watched it on the news, but a few of the people present here today lived through it. They became from one day to another refugees, exiled from their own country. We are very grateful to have today Dr. Ahmad Sarmast, founder of Afghan National Institute of Music, with us. He will be on Zoom joining us from Australia. He made sure that all members of the Institute of Music, 272 children and adults, were evacuated by November 2021. We would also like to thank Beth Mendelson and Yolanda López from the Voice of America for detailing the journey of the children, especially of those of Farida and Zohra, in this very moving documentary. I would also like to thank my colleague Dr. Marisa Key, a fervent activist in support of what was once Afghanistan, a country of thousands of years of heritage, the axis of the ancient Silk Road, a country of music, poetry, where Rumi was born 800 years ago, a country of literature and sciences. It is this Afghanistan and its remnants that we would like to support and celebrate as allies of the Afghan diaspora today, and through our activities at the Cambridge Center for the Study of Global Human Movement. We very much hope you will join us. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Yolanda López. I'm the acting director of Voice of America. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to Beth for a lovely introduction and to your colleagues here at Cambridge. What a perfect opportunity to speak about migration. And what a perfect venue here at Cambridge University's Center for the Study of Global Human Movement. And in just a few minutes, you will see the story of an incredible group of girls and their journey to a new home. When we talk about migration, we often talk of the movement of people across borders, a movement that brings new cultures, new opportunities, but also new challenges. But sometimes change comes without movement. For many in Afghanistan, the most important boundary isn't a line on the map. It's a date on the calendar, August 15, 2021. That date marks the boundary between two different Afghanistans. One with the Taliban in charge, one without. And it marks the date when so many things that we took for granted ceased to be options for most Afghans. Things like music, education, and press freedom. After August 15, the Afghan National Institute of Music and its students sought refuge abroad. Our film tells their story. But I want to take a moment to reflect on those who still remain inside of Afghanistan. They are migrants of a different sort, living in a very different place despite never leaving their homes. For them, the journalists of Voice of America aspire to be not only a voice from another country, but also a voice from another age.
Thanks to our courageous reporters around the world, including some who themselves fled Afghanistan, ordinary Afghans still have access to a free press. When they open Facebook or turn on their TVs, they can still see the same accurate and objective Dari and Pashto language news programs that they received before the Taliban returned to power, despite the fact that this week, they just blocked our content, our website. But don't worry, we are not giving up on our audience. We have our means to reach them. In that sense, it is our programming that is also migrant. Coming into Afghanistan from abroad and giving its audience a taste of the normalcy that they knew before August 15, 2021. This is at the very core of the mission of Voice of America. Some Afghans have found a new normal outside of Afghanistan, and for many of them, the journeys that they undertook to arrive at this new normal were anything but. It is now my honor to present one of these journeys to you. Ladies and gentlemen, Voice of America's Symphony of Courage.
We have a wonderful opportunity to have Beth Mendelson, Dr. Mercer Cui, Dr. Kayana Poncione-Bailey, but also we're very delighted and honored that Dr. Sarmast can join us at a very late night, at I think midnight, Dr. Saab, from Australia. So what we will do is we will invite the panelists. I would allow Dr. Sarmast to make the initial remarks, and then I'll invite the other three panelists to come. We'll move the chairs a little bit, have an initial remark from every panelist to discuss further what we have just seen in this wonderful film, and then have the opportunity for a conversation-style discussion, and also for yourselves to have the opportunity to speak to the panelists, ask questions, and then we will conclude with a reception to allow you further time to discuss what you've just seen, but also wider issues of Afghanistan, education furthermore. So, Dr. Soeb Sarmast, if you can hear me, the floor is yours. Welcome from Newnham College, University of Cambridge. We're very delighted that you can join us. We're very honored indeed on behalf of all the people here. Your time for the initial remarks, please, and then we'll go to the other panelists, and then we'll come back to you for a conversation-style engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamidi, for having me this evening, and I'm very, very pleased and honored to be part of this discussion to speak about the current state of the Afghanistan National Institute of Music and generally what's happening in Afghanistan with the musical rights of the Afghan people, as well as generally about the challenges that the Afghan people are going under the tyranny of the Taliban. I'm very pleased and very privileged and that the Afghanistan National Institute of Music young musicians were able to leave Afghanistan. And right now that I'm speaking to you, the students and the ANIM community moved from Lisbon to Portugal, from Lisbon of Portugal to the city of Braga. As the government of Portugal faced many challenges in keeping the community as a community in the city of Portugal, and to let us know and to let us to continue what we've been doing in Afghanistan and to make sure that our students have access back to quality music education, and we are able to reform, rebuild, and reconstruct our various ensembles and orchestras, while at the same time we are aiming to rebuild the Afghanistan National Institute of Music in Portugal. The audience probably will be very interested to know what's happening with Zohra and Farida now. I'm very pleased to let you know that Zohra and Farida are doing great, and they are among the top students, not only within the ANIM community, but in the Braga Conservatory. And the first term exam result of the girls were extremely, extremely good, excellent, of which I can be only proud. But I'm not here to speak what's generally happening, but also one question that maybe definitely come from the audience today: what's happened with the parents of the students and the rest of the ANIM community? And I'm very pleased to inform you that eventually the government of Portugal agreed to receive the families of the children within the next 3 to 4 months' time. And they will be very soon reunited with their families. The story of Farida and Zohra is a happy story. It's got a happy ending, that beautiful documentary. But is the situation as happy as we see the story of Farida and Zohra in Afghanistan? What's happening with musicians of Afghanistan? What's happening with the musical rights of the Afghan people? They are currently under the enormous challenges that Afghanistan is facing and enormous issues that exist in Afghanistan. We've been right that ANIM will not exist under the Taliban, in spite of the old whitewashing of the people involved in peace negotiation with the Taliban, that the Taliban of 2021 are different than the Taliban of 1996. But for us, who've been living in Afghanistan, who've been witnessing what was happening in Afghanistan and what kind of crime Taliban have been committing even before coming to power, it was obvious that by the return of the Taliban, ANIM will not exist, and the students of Afghanistan National Institute of Music will be deprived all their rights, their dreams, and their hope. Today, the musicians of Afghanistan are living in enormous, difficult condition. They were deprived our rights to make a living through music. The people of Afghanistan were deprived all their musical rights. The musicians of Afghanistan, in order to survive and to bring or to give a living to their families, they were forced in the first months of the Taliban to sell everything that they had in order to give a piece of bread to their families. But today, when I'm speaking to you, many musicians of Afghanistan give up to the most low-income jobs in order to survive. The people of Afghanistan have been deprived all their musical rights, rights to study musical languages, rights to make music, rights to learn music, musicians' right to make a living through music, and musicians lost the rights to have all platforms in their disposal to share the beauty of music with the rest of the community. The denial of the musical rights of the Afghanistan people is just a portion of the miseries or the denial of the human rights in Afghanistan. Women's rights is another important issue. In the last 1.5 years, the women of Afghanistan were entirely excluded from the society. They lost their appearance in social, political, and cultural life of the country. The women of Afghanistan even lost such a basic rights to education, rights to work, rights even to leave their houses in order to solve their problems. Today, many of the challenges of Afghanistan is currently under the shadow of the rights of women for education, rights of women to work. But is there any other problem in Afghanistan? Taliban, once again, demonstrated they are not capable to keep their promises and their words. Extrajudicial arrest and killing of the people are extremely, extremely fearful. Arrest of the educational activists, women rights activists is happening on a daily basis. Yes, extrajudicial. Right now that I'm talking to you, many activists, many members of the Afghan previous army, many members of the Afghan government, many social activists, activists for education and rights of women are in prisons of the Taliban. Videos and news that emerges from Afghanistan is shocking. It's shocking, the crimes and the cruelty of the Taliban. Displacement of different ethnic groups is another important issue that we should address it today here, and we should let the world know that the people of Afghanistan different ethnic group of Afghanistan who do not belong to the same ethnic group to which Taliban belongs are subject of many types of discrimination, including forcible displacement from their lands, from their houses, and from their provinces. We're here to celebrate that beautiful document here and also the freedom of the students of the Afghanistan National Institute of Music. But what's happening today in Afghanistan does not give us that privilege and to enjoy that celebration and to be happy. I'm happy that the students of the Afghanistan National Institute of Music have been rescued and they've got another opportunity to dream and to hope. But at the same time, we all are sad to see and to witness what's happening in Afghanistan in the field of human rights, women's rights, rights of children, rights of the people to freedom. Today, the people of Afghanistan lost their freedom. Freedom of expression is lost in Afghanistan. Freedom of movement is lost in Afghanistan, especially for women of the country. Freedom to protest, to ask for your rights, is totally banned, and you can face the most draconian approach of the Taliban. I know that my time is very limited, and hopefully I'll try my best to put everything that was in my heart, and I wanted to let you know and to raise awareness about this situation, but I'm here to answer your question and also to further develop and elaborate on those points that I made after the following panelists.
So we're very delighted to welcome the rest of the panelists. I have Beth Mendelson. She's the director of Symphony of Courage, which you just watched. She's also a senior executive producer of the special programming and documentaries of the Voice of America and was previously the chief of the Afghanistan service. So Beth, I'll start with you and then I'll go to Dr. Kayana, and then I'll go to Marissa. And 5 minutes, please.
First of all, let me say thank you on behalf of Voice of America for having us here tonight. We're really delighted to be able to share our film with you. And, you know, storytelling. I'm a storyteller. And what better story to have told than of Symphony of Courage? You know, stories break down into 5 elements. You have character, conflict, plot, setting, and theme. Every culture has its own stories or narratives which are shared as a means to entertain, to educate, to preserve cultural heritage, and to instill moral values. And I was really fortunate to be able to tell this story. It was an incredible experience for me as a filmmaker, and let me tell you a little bit about how it came to be. The inspiration for the film came to me on August 15th, 2021. You've heard that date mentioned a lot here. I had been to the Kabul airport many, many times, and I had actually passed through the Abbey Gate. When I was watching the news unfold, I was heartbroken to see what was going on in Afghanistan. It all looked so familiar to me because from 2006 to 2012, I was the chief of the Afghan service and started television into Afghanistan at that time. And I worked with some of the most incredible journalists when we did TV Ashna, some of the bravest, most courageous people. And I knew that once this happened, once the Taliban took over, life was going to be hell for these people. And I actually wept every night when I would watch the news. I could not stop crying. And I said, what can I do? What can I do to make a difference in a country that clearly had made a difference in my life? So I saw an article in the Washington Post that talked about Ahmad Sarmast and about the orchestra. And I thought, that is a story that I really want to talk about. It had boldness and it had pathos, and it was something that I thought the Voice of America should tell this story. And I was fortunate to be able to do that. And Dr. Sarmast and I got in touch. We had a long discussion about what my vision was about making this film and with his team. And eventually, when I was talking to Dr. Sarmast, he was in the midst of 4 airlifts about bringing his students out of Afghanistan. And by the time I reached him, there was only 1 airlift left, and that was of Farida and Zohra Ahmadi and their uncle Juma. So I had very little time to do this, and not even certain I was going to be able to make it happen. I had to get a crew there. I had to find a way to find a cameraman. At that time, you couldn't even get a cameraman in Afghanistan. Everybody had left. All the foreign cameramen had been gone. So I found somebody I knew at the New York Times, put me in touch with somebody named Jordan Byron, who was an Australian cameraman. Jordan and I spoke many times. I knew what Afghanistan looked like and felt like, but I had to do this from my living room. I sat in my house and had to direct the girls. The very first scene that you see of them with the mountains was a vision I had in my mind because I wanted the world to understand how beautiful and how mystical Afghanistan it is, because I believe it really is. And one of the first decisions we had to make was whether we were going to have the violin. When Farida was playing her violin, I thought it was important to have that aspect of the music in the film. We had a safe house is where we filmed this. And before we got the violin, we had 3 teams of drivers to bring the violin to the safe house, because it was really on my watch that if anything were to happen to those girls, that was a decision I had to make as a person who understands foreign policy and also as a filmmaker. Was it worth the risk? I was told it was going to be fine. We're going to be okay. I didn't sleep the night before, but I'm glad I made that decision. I think it was the right, I think seeing the music in their hands really made a difference about what their journey was going to be. Now, talking about the journey, I didn't know what we were going to do to show the movement of them leaving Afghanistan, when they were going to, say goodbye to their grandmother, who I knew was a central figure in their lives, what we were going to do about this. So I worked with Uncle Juma and turned him into a cameraman. He started to use his iPhone, and he was fantastic. He was absolutely amazing. We would be on the phone, and I'd be talking to him about the shots I wanted, and he said, I can do that, I'll give it a go. I had no choice, because we couldn't, for their safety, get anybody there. So Juma used his iPhone. The scene you saw with the grandma, Juma did it when they were at the airport. He also opened up his personal archives. He gave me all kinds of pictures of the girls when they were young. And, we developed a relationship where I think he felt he could share that kind of information with us. So he did that. And then we had to figure out. We had teams. We were doing this all in real time. We had a team in Doha. We had the cameraman who had wrapped up the shooting there. We're talking to Dr. Sarmast. You see Dr. Sarmast on the phone, where he's talking about, them, when the plane was going to land. That was like the real deal. And I was on the phone talking to our crews in Doha and telling them, let's get ready, let's go and do this. So they went, and that scene where the girls are landing, I think it's one of the emotional core of the film, because you really understand the trauma the girls had been through, the resilience of being brave enough to leave, and the hope for their future. I think that scene really becomes the fulcrum of the film in a lot of ways that lets us tell the story, and develop their theme. When they finally go to Portugal and they start a new life, I was able to interview them there. I got to meet them. The first time I met them was in Portugal. I had spoken to them, and I got a sense of them and the opportunity that was before them. And I think one of the things that I want to say about making this film is, you have a message you want to put across. You want to be hopeful, you want to be realistic. But I think this is a story that really needed to be told. I don't believe anybody has had a chance to tell the story in the way we were able to do that. And I'm so pleased that we were able to do that, and thankful to Dr. Sarmast for trusting us to make this film, and to say that I don't know what the future will be for Farida and Zohra. I think nobody knows. Maybe they will be the next Yo-Yo Ma's. But without Dr. Sarmast and those 5 airlifts, none of this would have been possible.
For me, the highlight was saying goodbyes to the grandmother. And often in our migration research and in our analytical world, we talk about, do you really leave, and talking about roots and things like that. And I think I was very, very moved by the way, and I'm sure others were as well, that you had captured that. So we're very delighted and honored that you've come all the way from the United States for this event. Thank you so much to you. Next, I'm going to go to Dr. Kayana Poncione-Bailey, who's a conductor and an early career research fellow focused on the orchestral activities of Afghanistan. You're also somebody who's mentored ANIM students and is currently working with a number of Afghan scholars and musicians in exile to produce the first book, which will focus exclusively on the historical and contemporary activities, practices, and meaning-making of the orchestras of Afghanistan. Very delighted to have you. Your 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. And firstly, thanks to everybody who has come tonight. Thanks to the organizers. Thank you very much, Marisa, for inviting me. Thank you, as always, to Dr. Ahmad Sarmast for everything he has done, which means we are here having this conversation today. I will try and keep things brief when there is a lot to say. Just to give a little bit of background, I feel like I'm here representing 2 groups, really. One, the research stakeholders group for the the Orchestras of Afghanistan Research Project, for which I'm PI at Sheffield University as part of my Leverhulme research, and also the International Campaign for Afghanistan's Musicians, which is a collection of volunteers who just kind of came up from wherever they were during those really difficult days in August, September, October, and continuing since the Taliban has taken over the country. And I wanted to pick up on a couple of things. One, the first one, it goes back to the very beginning of this conversation about the people left behind in Afghanistan. And as Dr. Sarmast has pointed out, yes, the students from ANIM have been wonderfully evacuated to Portugal, but there are many, many, many musicians left behind in the country, many, many musicians who have, and I won't name any names, but one musician who fortunately did manage to get out was telling me just today about how, as soon as the Taliban entered the country, or entered Kabul, he was forced to throw all of his musical instruments down the well, and they were gone. In one instant, no time to think about it, just had to do it. And there are many people who had to do that and still live in the country, still silenced, live in the country. So the International Campaign for Afghanistan's Musicians, we have no magic. We wish we did. We wish we were able to be able to press the buttons and get people out of the country. And I think one of the things, the realities now is there was a sense that there was a window. There was a sense that there was a window at the time where the countries were really focused on trying to get vulnerable people out of Afghanistan, and it very much feels like a lot of those windows have closed. You feel like you're knocking on really closed doors today. There are some countries that, for example, Germany, who is doing a bit better in continuing to allow musicians in. The UK was not one of those countries who recognize the vulnerability of Afghan musicians and prioritize them on the evacuations, which is a shame. So one of the things that the International Campaign for Afghanistan's Musicians does is we do collect donations, working with a charity here in the UK, specifically to provide life-saving aid to the musicians that we have contact with on the ground in Afghanistan. That, as you can imagine, is still challenging to do. There's a lot of concerns around identity and making sure that everybody is safe in that process, but it's something that we continue to be committed to. So the other hat is as a member of the, and kind of the cleric, the clerk of the Afghanistan, the Orchestras of Afghanistan Research Stakeholders Group. And that project is really, it's about preservation and flourishing. It's about resistance. It's about musicians and scholars from Afghanistan telling their stories about the orchestras of Afghanistan, why they matter, what those histories are, what their current practices are, what the practices were, be being able to document that for that future generation so that that knowledge is preserved so that it can be transferred. And alongside that, we have a wonderful sort of performance strand. Whilst a lot of the younger musicians in Portugal are working with the orchestras there, I'm working with older students. So think of them in college, former lecturers at the Kabul University Music Department, commissioning new pieces and getting them performed. So as a conductor, I'm very much committed to really celebrating this unique musical practice and helping it flourish so that when we have students who graduate from ANIM, they will still have places to make music in the rest of the world. So we'll speak more, I'm sure. Thank you very much.
Last but not the least, Dr. Mercer Cui, who's the convener of the Afghanistan desk at the Center for the Study of Global Human Movement. She's also a fellow at Lucy Cavendish College here and a college lecturer in politics at Magdalen College and an associate lecturer, Department of Sociology. She was previously an advisor to the Afghanistan Peace and Reintegration Program in Afghanistan. Marissa, you've been involved in so much, and I should acknowledge your role in convening us together with colleagues. So we're very delighted, and also very delighted to be making the initial remarks.
I want to begin by thanking Yolanda and Beth for coming all the way to Cambridge and for showing this brilliant, inspirational film, and also Hamid for helping us organize this in a Chatham way, and Tuba for everything that he's done with the center. We know that this film will be a catalyst for change. I worked for the Afghanistan Peace and Reintegration Program that led on to the peace talks in Doha. Clearly, despite more than a decade of talking to the Taliban and dialogue, our goals for peace and an inclusive government that represented all of the people of Afghanistan failed. I met with Minister Staniksai, who led the APRP and who was my boss and one of the chief negotiators in Doha when he came to the UK last week. He and many former leaders know that their time is up. They believe that the future belongs to Afghanistan's youth. The question is now, how can we best support them? The chaotic international withdrawal signaled a formal end to hard power, to influence Afghanistan's socioeconomic and political trajectory. The Taliban have reneged on promises for moderation. They've disenfranchised more than half of the population. Women have been erased from the public sphere. The December 24th ban on women working in the humanitarian sector was the most recent act of violence. Dr. Sarmast's courage and the dedication that he has to the Yemen and Beth Mendelson's brilliant film give us a critical window on the potential for soft power. If music can be the language of empowerment and resistance, how should we understand the resistance and the struggle of Afghan women more generally? Resistance doesn't need to be violent. This is something that Gandhi taught us, as my students know. It is often the quiet push for change that triumphs, but it needs solidarity. One of my former colleagues in Afghanistan lived through the first iteration of the Taliban. She risked her life attending secret schools. I asked her what she thinks, why she thinks arts and education are the new weapons for resistance against Taliban oppression. This is what she told me. The arts and education matter because they make my brain and my heart stretch wide. When our homes become prison, when we become confined there, they give us release. Even in times of terrible persecution, they help us to understand people with very, very different views from our own. We will need this empathy to find ways to change the Taliban's current gender apartheid. And we will need it as we try to build a new Afghanistan, although that rebuilding may have to start from exile, as the Yemen has shown us. The arts and education make us feel connected to the world. They're a gift from one soul to another. They're a record of our culture and all that Afghans once achieved and will achieve. I think that they're like an arrow pointing towards a vision of the future when we can see no future. They give us hope in the darkest moments. They give us courage to change. they can start a revolution. Dr. Sarmast and Beth Mendelson have shown us that even when faced with existential risk, Afghans won't be silenced. Their courage is undimmed. The point of our gathering tonight is to strengthen awareness of Afghanistan and its crisis and the very, very fragile situation of its refugees. We want this film to be a catalyst for each of you. The question is, what can you do? How can we together leverage the rich resources of the academic community of Cambridge? The Centre for the Study of Global Human Movement is really excited about the projects that we are initiating. We've already delivered an English pilot program to Afghan refugees through our partner group, Future Brilliance. We want to expand that program and deliver English for academic purposes to Afghan refugees in the UK and women banned from university in Afghanistan. We hope to recruit university students and staff who want to be volunteers, who want to be mentors, who want to be listeners, who want to be advisors, and we're developing a short orientation workshop to facilitate that. We're already running lots of events to showcase the diverse achievements of Afghan refugees, including poets, musicians, actors and film producers, and we hope that we're going to have the Azada Ensemble visit us soon in Cambridge. We have a closed roundtable in March looking at calls for inclusive government with the Taliban, involving former Afghan ministers, that we hope will result in a policy paper. We're putting together a youth convention in May to discuss new visions of Afghanistan and explore concrete solutions in the current context. We met with the Afghan Women's Coalition at the House of Lords to find ways to safeguard women, and we're taking that forward. We're conducting research on the rhetoric and the realities of Operation Warm Welcome, which has turned out to be Operation Cold Shoulder, and the UK's Afghan resettlement programs. We need your ideas, we need your support, we need funding. Please come to Tuba and I with your ideas and your time. Help us support soft change, soft power change for Afghan women who have shown us how to courageously harness that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marissa. I will spend maybe another 10 to 15 minutes with your permission to have a conversation with the panelists, and then I'll open it to the floor. Dr. Sarmast, maybe I can come first to you in the same order that the panelists have spoken. Marissa highlighted some really important work that they're doing, but also the importance of solidarity. So maybe I can ask you, Dr. Soeb, if you can enlighten us. Why is conserving and preserving of Afghanistan's musical heritage so critical for the future of the country? And also, from your perspective, how should the international solidarity look like from the work they've done based on your perspective? I'll give you a few minutes to enlighten us, and then I'll go to the panelists with a single question each, and then I'll open it to the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamidi. I strongly believe safeguarding the musical tradition of Afghanistan is not important only for the country, but it's also important for the international community. The rich musical heritage of Afghanistan does not belong only to us, but it belongs to the international community. It's part of the diversity of musical tradition and musical practices that exist around the world, which makes the musical scene of the world much, much richer than we expect. It's also important for the music, for the identity of the Afghan people. Depriving the Afghan people from their musical right and musical identity, it means that ignoring and denying a full identity for the Afghan people. What Taliban did during their first reign in power and what they're doing today is not just the denial of the musical rights of the Afghan people, but it's also a step towards the demolition of the rich cultural heritage of the country. Now that I'm talking here, in the last few weeks, a new development took place in Afghanistan when the Taliban stepped in to destroy monuments and statues in the squares of Afghanistan cities. And after that, there was some TV program with the leadership, some leadership of the Taliban, which did not hide their intention or their plan that anything that does not fit within their reading of Islam, within their interpretation of Islam, any artifact, any arts heritage, cultural heritage, archaeological heritage will be destroyed in Afghanistan. And we are today, when we are speaking about the musical heritage of Afghanistan, it's also important to let the world know that if Taliban will not be stopped destroying and demolishing the statues and monuments, archaeological and not only archaeological, but sculptures in Afghanistan, they're slowly going to make their way to the Museum of Afghanistan. And once again, we will be facing the same cultural genocide that Taliban carried out during their first reign when they demolished the thousands of artifacts in museums of Kabul and other museums of the country, but also the two largest Buddhas of Afghanistan. When we are speaking today, we are not speaking only about the musical rights of Afghan people, about the musical heritage of Afghan people. I would like to raise awareness that Afghanistan, once again, is facing a cultural genocide. And we have to be ready to stop the Taliban and make sure that cultural genocide is not taking place again. And I call on the international community to condemn the Taliban ban of music, condemn the destruction of statues and monuments in Afghanistan, and make sure and keep the Taliban accountable about the preservation of Afghan rich cultural heritage, including musical heritage of Afghanistan. And I call on the international community to demand from the Taliban the restoration of the musical rights of Afghan people and Afghan musicians. And today, when we are speaking here, I would like to call on you and to everyone in this room to join us in demanding from the Taliban an immediate release of Musa Shahid. Musa Shahid is an Afghan singer from Panjshir who has been recently arrested by the Taliban for no reason, apart of being a musician. I also use this tribune to call on the international community and your audience for an immediate release of the Ustad Mashal, Professor Mashal of Kabul University, who've been arrested for no reason rather than promoting education and advocating for the educational rights of the Afghan people.
Thank you very much for the very compassionate and emphatic points, Dr. Sarmast, and clearly a lot to take from your remarks. Beth, maybe I can come to you next. In light of what Dr. Sarmast said, what has been said so far, in the absence of international and national entities such as the VOA and other platforms, including Afghanistan's own very good media scene that was actually a competitor at the regional level before the Taliban took over, despite all the conflict, what can the Afghans do and how can we abroad help them do in terms of documenting their stories, telling their stories? You've talked about some of the logistical difficulties, but how does it look like to you going forward to document these lived experiences, tell these stories, and for us to critically receive them?
Oh. One of the things I wanted to say that's so remarkable tonight is about the call for action that Marissa and Dr. Sarmast have made. This is a beautiful and powerful film in that it initiates discussion and it makes you think about, even though it's, people want to call it soft power, however you want to refer to it, it tells a narrative that's not been told before, and we see what happens to young people and to musicians that Dr. Sarmast was talking about. So I think the unification of some sort of international messaging, I think it has to be done either at a university level. I don't know how this message gets across, but I think that's an important takeaway from this evening. In terms of the storytelling from Afghanistan, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to do. I don't know moving forward how you tell other stories there, but there are certainly other stories to be told, the stories of these musicians going to the streets of Afghanistan. We're where there's no shops anymore where you can buy musical instruments. I mean, I think we have to continue telling this story. There are camera people there. It's difficult to get in and out of Afghanistan right now. The Taliban have made it incredibly difficult. As Yolanda said in her earlier remarks, we can't even broadcast there in the way that we used to. I mean, they block us at every turn. So I think we have to be defiant, as journalists and as, academicians and people who care about this issue. You have to find a way to unite. Where there's a will, there's a way. I'm sure that there's other stories that are going to interest me in Afghanistan in my lifetime, and we will find ways to tell them. And I think we have to be persistent with it.
Thank you very much for your thoughtful response. Kayana, maybe I can come to you. This is slightly rephrasing the question I've already asked, but why is it important in your perspective to preserve and appreciate the significance of the orchestra music in Afghanistan? This is in light of the pressures that, there are so many different types of music and art and archaeological sort of significance that we have to, but why is the orchestra so important in your experience?
So this is actually a question that I have put to my colleagues from Afghanistan, musicians from Afghanistan. What is it about orchestral music that means so much to them? And what it means to them is that show of unity. So orchestras coming together, lots of different voices coming together, is really critical for them. So that unity together, that sense of being able to send a message and project a message is also really important. This comes back to that storytelling, actually, Beth. For the musicians that I know from Afghanistan that work in orchestras, orchestral music gives them an opportunity to share their voice and to share their thoughts about what they want to see for the future, to have a call for peace. So it's very much a platform for communicating about their values and what they want to see for the future. And if I can take that opportunity to actually respond, Marissa, a bit more to that call for action. I think there are, I did my doctorate actually at the University of Oxford, so I apologize to everybody in the room on the other side of the tracks. And I'm very aware of the platforms that these institutions provide for those of us who are part of the community, right? So there are different things that we can lever. There are different ways to provide windows for other people's voices to be heard. And I think, again, Beth, through your storytelling, this is what, there are those windows into the voices of Farida and Zohra. And that's what that film platform gives them a voice to the world. The work that I'm doing is trying to give a voice to Afghan composers, use the platforms and the levers that I have to make those voices heard, far and wide. And so I guess it's always that reflection of what do I have access to? Who do I know that I can ask, who needs to be heard, and what can we do to bring that to light, whether that's a cultural thing, whether or not it might have to do with a young person in sport or somebody in politics. It doesn't have to be music. Music is such a great mechanism because it does bring forward those senses, those emotions, and really connects people. So yeah, I think there is a lot that we can do both through the storytelling and again, as people in really extraordinary places with, quite frankly, folks, access to a lot of resources.
Thank you very much. I'll come to you, Marissa, before I open the floor. You touched on this already, but I think it's important to maybe unpack a little bit further this issue of solidarity. We often hear about, when we worked in Afghanistan, we were told about the donor fatigue. There was this phrase constantly used about donor fatigue, international fatigue. And boom, you have the Taliban return, and suddenly the situation is so worse. So there's also this pressure right now to have solidarity and solidarities across the globe with different things. So, there's a risk in the West with solidarity fatigue. So why do you think it's important to have global solidarity and strengthen global solidarity with the Afghan men and women? Because I know in your work, you're not only focusing on men and women, you're also focusing on the entire society.
I guess if we think about the situation of women, so many women say that they feel like they're living in a huge prison, the house becomes a prison. And if we remember what it was like to live through COVID and to be stuck in a house over and over again every day, but that's stretched forever before you, you can imagine how difficult it is. Women feel erased from the public sphere. They feel, some women talk about a genocide of women going forward. When they protest, they're electrocuted, they're tortured, some women disappear, other women are killed. It's not something that's new for them. It's part of a historical cycle that they've endured before, and many women didn't believe it when they said Taliban 2.0 would be different. The international community is now enmeshed in the war in Ukraine. It has no appetite to use hard power again in Afghanistan, although there are sectors of the Afghan population that call for that. But soft power is now the weapon of choice, and we have to respect that most Afghans themselves are tired of endless war, and we need to support the kinds of strategies that they want to support and have solidarity with them. I think that Beth's film makes us understand the strength of those strategies, that the situation is really urgent. We know that suicide levels are elevated. Afghanistan's the only country in the world where women can't go to secondary school, now banned from university and from working in the humanitarian sector, where they delivered to other women and they also made money for their families. We know too from UN studies that women are essential for lasting peace, for reconciliation, for true justice. That's been shown over and over again in Srebrenica, where women have worked to heal after devastating massacres, in Rwanda after genocide. And we know that Afghan women have a long tradition of healing through reconciliation. The war on terror was or 9/11 was the trigger for the war on terror, and the Taliban as a pariah government are now drawing closer and closer to other terrorist groups. It's only women who might be able to bring about lasting peace, and a lasting peace hopefully through soft power. So when women are diminished in Afghanistan, we are diminished as well, and we're less safe.